Boy, John chapter 11 has got some profound things to talk about, as there is irrefutable proof of who Christ is in this chapter. Uh, Lots of testimonies, witnesses of people, as well as Christ does a miracle that no one has ever could do. This is an impossible miracle that he pulls off in this chapter. Verse 1. Now a certain man was sick, named Lazarus of Bethany. Now you probably already understand, if you're familiar with this, you know where this story is going. Let's get into this and learn more from it. This is the town of Bethany, is where he's from, the town of Mary and her sister Martha. Two women are mentioned in here. Okay. Now, if you look, there's the brackets around, or the parentheses around verse 2. It was that Mary which anointed the Lord with ointment, and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was sick. That's a scribal addition. Verse 2 is a scribal addition. Okay. Now, what's interesting about this is nearly all of the oldest manuscripts of the Gospel of John confuse Martha and Mary. This is a problem we have. Could they be the same person? Some scholars think that. Could there be two sisters? The two names tend to be crossed out and the other name added in. Which name is crossed out and added is different in some of the manuscripts. So there's Mary, there's Martha. The problem is that the scribes had a hard time delineating which one was which in the story. And they kept confusing, depending upon which manuscript you read, they kept confusing these two and conflating them. That has led to some scholars to say maybe they actually were the same person, but they were literally broken into two people to prove a point. That we don't know for sure, but that's just an interesting thought that some scholars have. So in Luke's story of Lazarus, the oldest manuscripts mainly only talk about Mary and not Martha. We don't hear much about Martha in Luke. In Luke is some of the older manuscripts we have. It is believed that Martha may have been added to the story. The point is that there are changes in the manuscripts over time, so we have to be careful taking the literal translation of the Bible as truth. Seeking the Spirit is what is more important when we are searching for the truth. So again, in this story, we have revisions. Even inside the Gospels themselves, there's this challenge. This is the problem. So we have to think about, how does this, we don't know. Is it all Mary? Did Martha get added to add a component, kind of a literary component to this? Was there Mary and Martha? Were they sisters and they're separate? We actually don't know the truth of it. But we see in the manuscripts, the older manuscripts of the New Testament, that there's some discrepancies in this story. So just realize that, okay? In fact, Joseph Smith, in his translation, adds to verse 2. He says, and Mary, his sister, who anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair, lived with her sister Martha, in whose house her brother Lazarus was sick. So that's how Joseph Smith, in his translation, interprets verse 2. So let's move on with this and continue with the story here. Verse 3, therefore his sister sent unto him, saying, Lord, behold, he whom thou lovest is sick. When Jesus heard that, he said, this sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God might be glorified thereby. Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. Now it's interesting, in verse 5, Mary's not mentioned. Martha's mentioned, but Mary is not named specifically, just and her sister. So that could be an interesting twist in this idea of understanding this better. Now verse 6, when he had heard therefore that he was sick, he abode 2 days still in the same place where he was. So the Lord was doing something. They sent messengers to go to the Lord, to go to Jesus and say, hey, your buddy Lazarus, whom you care a lot about, is really sick. And he thinks about it for a second, and he said, this sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God might be glorified thereby. So he makes a statement about what the meaning of all this event is going to be like. And then he waits 2 whole days before he starts the journey to go to Lazarus. That's what it said. That's verse 6. He waited 2 days. before he went. So the Lord's timing is on purpose on this. He's not just, whatever, I'll see him when it's convenient. He wasn't. We know it was to allow for Lazarus to die so he could be resurrected. There's a timing to this. We can see it from our perspective. They couldn't see it from theirs. The people did not realize that at that time, though, the Lord's timing is one thing we need to have faith in. He knows what he's doing. So that's a good lesson for us from this, okay? These people are like, hurry, please come save Lazarus. And he's like, don't worry about him. It'll be okay. And then he waits 2 days. Could you imagine being Mary and Martha going, did you went and you told Christ, right? You told Jesus about him, right? Yeah, we told Jesus and everything. And why is he not here yet? I don't know why he's not here. I don't know what's going on. He took 2 whole days before he left to go see Lazarus. There's purpose in God's timing in our life. We might not fully understand it in the moment, his timing. But we need to have faith that God knows his timing. And as long as he knows his timing and we put our faith in God, it will work out. That's an important lesson for us to learn from this. So now, verse 7, then after that saith he to his disciples, let us go into Judea again. His disciples saying to him, Master, the Jews of late sought to stone thee, and goest thou thither again? Jesus answered, Are there not 12 hours in the day? If any man walk in the day, he stumbleth not, because he seeth the light of this world. But if a man walk in the night, he stumbleth, because there is no light in him. And these things said he, and after that he saith unto them, Our friend Lazarus sleepeth, but I go that I may awake him out of sleep. So his apostles are worried. They've tried to stone him more than once at Jerusalem, and he wants to go by that area now, and they're like, I don't know if that's a good idea for you, Jesus. They're kind of seeking to kill you. This might not be good. And then he teaches them this parable. So Jesus, in this parable of walking during the day in the light and walking at night, Jesus is stating that he would not try to sneak into the city by night when his opponents would be sleeping. Spiritually, he is telling us that we must follow the path that the Spirit lights up for us. The path we must take is the path God wants us to take. There may be many options to accomplish something, but look to the Spirit for guidance in taking the path the Spirit lights up for us. This is the path with the most help from God. Something good to remember in the last days on how to escape tribulations. That's a very important thing for us to think about. So this is very important for us in our idea, especially from a leadership standpoint, is realize that there is a path, there is a journey, and there's lots of ways that things can get accomplished. But what is the path Christ wants us to take? What can we do to follow him? That is what we need to do. And that's where the guide to the Spirit comes in. How do we follow the Spirit to follow, out of all these options, which is the one that we need to be taking? And that's when we follow the Spirit to help us with that. So now they're going. Verse 12, then said his disciples, Lord, if he sleep, he shall do well. So if he's dead, if he's gone, he's in a much better place. Is kind of like that idea. Verse 13, howbeit Jesus spake of his death, but they thought that he had spoken of taking of rest in sleep. So they're like, if he's asleep, if he's sick and he's sleeping, he's healing. He's doing better. And then Jesus turns to them and says, Lazarus is dead. So he's just really straightforward with them right there. And they're like, oh, wow. Verse 15, and I am glad for your sakes that I was not there, to the intent that ye may believe. Nevertheless, let us go into him. Now, verse 15's got to, again, sound kind of weird because Christ is going, I'm glad Lazarus is dead and that I wasn't there to save him. And they're like, what? What do you mean? And he says, this is so that you can believe more about who I am. So that's what it's about. Now, verse 16, This is interesting, and it, there's kind of this jump between verse 15 and 16 a little bit. It feels like, but he's like, nevertheless, let us go unto him. Now Thomas makes this statement in verse 16. Okay, this is the doubting Thomas guy, and this is, if we're just reading the scriptures, this kind of comes out of nowhere. Verse 16, then said Thomas, which is called Didymus, unto his fellow disciples, let us also go that we may die with him. Where did that come from? What was the deal? What was going on with that? Now, in the TV show The Chosen, they create an entire narrative of what could have happened that would make Thomas want to agree that going to Jerusalem to die like Lazarus is dead is a good idea. I'm sure the apostles are like, what are you talking about, Thomas? What? So this, they built this whole narrative of he was in love and she dies and Jesus won't bring her back won't heal her and things. And so Thomas is a little bitter, like he's kind of in a depressed funk, because he wants to die and go to heaven and see his bride to be. And, it's an interesting thing. I don't know, and would have to talk to the 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 writers and the people that are helping put The Chosen on to see if there's any kind of a historical basis for that storyline. I don't think there is. I don't think there's any historical basis for that storyline. It's though explaining what could possibly be there to why would Thomas say this at this moment. Basically, is what they're getting at with that. Now, the Joseph Smith translation has something to say about verse 16. They said, then Thomas said, which is called Didymus, unto his fellow disciples, let us all go that we may die with him. For they feared lest the Jews should take Jesus and put him to death, for as yet they did not understand the power of God. So a little bit of explanation in here. Now, the interesting thing about the word Didymus that's brought up here, Thomas, which is called Didymus. Didymus is the Greek word for twin. So Thomas is a twin. He has a twin sibling, twin brother, twin sister, we don't know. But just some interesting things about verse 16. It kind of comes out of the blue with no background as to why Thomas is thinking that. But The Chosen tried to put a narrative in there to help understand that in a logical way. So verse 17, now we jump forward. Then when Jesus came, he found that he had lain in the grave 4 days already. So he waited 2 days and then came to, which was probably a 2-day journey to get to where Lazarus was. So he'd been dead 4 days. He died shortly after the messenger came to Jesus. So this is interesting. In this time of Christ, okay, in this time of we're somewhere around 29-ish AD. It was commonly believed that when someone died, that the spirit would kind of linger around the body for a couple of days and then would leave. And if you couldn't help that person out within that first couple of days, then the spirit would leave and they would never come back again. And so waiting 4 days means, according to this cultural tradition, Lazarus is gone. There's no hope. No hope at all. Verse 18, now Bethany was nigh to Jerusalem, about 15 furlongs off, or about 607 feet, 185 meters, kind of what they would call a stadium, is what they would call that back then, basically in the Greek word. Verse 19, and many of the Jews came to Martha and Mary to comfort them concerning their brother. That was common. It was tradition. Their brother died. We're going to mourn and help you and comfort you in this time of sadness. Verse 20, then Martha, as soon as she heard that Jesus was coming, went and met him, but Mary sat still in the house. Then said Martha unto Jesus, Lord, if thou hadst been here, my brother had not died. But I know that even now, whatsoever thou wilt ask of God, God will give it thee. Mary and Martha are expressing doubt and faith at the same time. They have faith that Jesus can heal, and they're showing doubt about why it took so long for Jesus to come to help. This is an emotional response to what happened. So that's what they're looking at here, okay? If you had been here earlier, my brother had not died. But even that being said, I know that whatever you ask of God, God will give it to you. So I know that there's a chance you can bring him back. But we missed the first main opportunity. So I'm not quite sure how this is going to work out. Now, verse 23, Jesus saith unto her, Thy brother shall rise again. Martha said unto him, I know that he shall rise again in the resurrection at the last day. So again, Martha's looking at this from her own perspective, okay? In her mind, she understands the concept of resurrection at the end of the world, but has not considered the idea of right now. She's like, I know he's going to be resurrected in the last day eventually, and that'll be great, but I'm sad that he's dead now. And then Jesus, in verse 25, says unto her, I am the resurrection and the life. He that believeth in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live. And whosoever liveth and believeth in me shall never die. Believest thou this? Now this is again talking about the grander goal and reason for Christ. Why we believe in him, why we follow him. Not just literal life, but like spiritual life and free from sin, free from that bondage, new life, those kinds of things too. And so verse 27, she saith unto him, Yea, Lord, I believe that thou art the Christ, the Son of God, which should come into the world. She had a testimony of Christ. Verse 28, and when she had said so, she went her way and called Mary her sister secretly, saying, The Master is come and calleth for thee. So now we don't get this exchange from Christ going, hey, go call Mary. But apparently he did. So Martha goes to get Mary and says, hey, Jesus wants to talk to you. So they go out there. Verse 29, as soon as she heard that, she arose quickly and came unto him. Because remember, Mary was left in the house. Martha came out and saw Jesus and went and talked with him, had that conversation. And then Jesus says, will you get Mary? And so she goes, gets Mary out of the house. And Mary comes out. Verse 29, so I just read that. Verse 30, now Jesus was not yet come into the town, but was in that place where Martha met him. The Jews then, which were with her in the house, and comforted her when they saw Mary, that she rose up hastily and went out, followed her, saying, She goeth unto the grave to weep there. Then when Mary was come where Jesus was, and saw him, she fell down at his feet, saying unto him, Lord, if thou hadst been here, my brother had not died. When Jesus therefore saw her weeping, and the Jews also weeping which came with her, he groaned in the spirit and was troubled. Now this Greek word here, troubled, was used, means moved with profound emotion. Basically, that's for the Greek translation, that's what it means. When it says he was troubled, he was moved with profound emotion. Verse 34, and said, Where have ye laid him? And they said unto him, Lord, come and see. Verse 35, one of the shortest verses ever, Jesus wept. Now, Jesus feels empathy for the people. He isn't lecturing them, but meeting them at their level in the place they are. Then he teaches them through helping. So he is at their level. He is addressing the challenges at their pace, at their level. He is weeping, they're crying, everybody's crying. It's a sad moment. He is at that point. Verse 36, then said the Jews, Behold how he loved him. And some of them said, Could not this man which opened the eyes of the blind have caused that even this man should not have died? Jesus therefore again groaning in himself cometh to the grave. It was a cave, and a stone lay upon it. Jesus said, Take away the stone. So Jesus hasn't told them what he's going to do. They just think he's coming to mourn the loss of his friend. So then he says, Take away the stone. Martha, the sister of him that was dead, said unto him, Lord, by this time he stinketh, for he hath been dead 4 days. So the body is going through rigor mortis. They didn't do embalming back then like we do today. They put spices on the body. They did things, but they the body decayed and fell apart. So verse 40, Jesus saith unto her, Said I not unto thee that if thou wouldest believe, thou shouldest see the glory of God? So now Jesus is reminding Martha of their earlier conversation just a few moments ago. Verse 41, then they took away the stone from the place where the dead was laid. And Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, Father, I thank thee that thou hast heard me. That probably implies that Christ was giving a silent prayer in his mind, talking to God about the situation. Whether that was in the moment, whether that was on his way over, whether that was during that 2-day period of waiting, we don't know when that happened. But apparently, Christ had prayed to God, and now he's saying, thank you for listening to me and hearing me. Verse 42, and I knew that thou hearest me always, but because of the people which stand by, I said it, that they may believe that thou hast sent me. And when he thus had spoken, he cried with a loud voice, Lazarus, come forth. And he that was dead came forth, bound hand and foot with grave clothes. His face was bound about with a napkin. Jesus saith unto them, Loose him, and let him go. Now this has got to be like some of the most amazing experience. Could you imagine, this guy's dead, we've buried him, we've wrapped him up in the clothes to kind of hold the body together, to keep it all together as he decays. We've put the spices, we've done the mourning. According to our traditions, he's gone. He's gone. There's no more coming back. And then he walks again and comes out. That's just got to be like, I mean, just amazing. Could you imagine that? If you were there and you witnessed this, what would you think? I mean, what would be going through your mind? You were there, you saw, Lazarus died. Maybe you helped to take care of his body and entomb him in there, and then he suddenly walks again. What would you think? I'd love to read that in the comments, your thoughts on that. So verse 45, then many of the Jews which came to Mary and had seen the things which Jesus did believed on him. That'd be kind of hard not to believe in Christ after that, honestly. But some of them went their ways to the Pharisees and told them what things Jesus had done. They're talking to the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and things about this. Verse 47, then gathered the chief priests and the Pharisees a council, that's a Sanhedrin, and said, what do we? For this man doeth many miracles. If we let him thus alone, all men will believe on him, and the Romans shall come and take away both our place and nation. Now, here's the thing to think about. They're speaking very truthfully. They can't refute this miracle. They can't just write this off. He rose a person from the dead. I mean, it's one thing to heal a hand. It's one thing to heal a blindness. It's one thing to feed people miraculously, but to bring somebody back from the dead? What the heck? How can we refute this? And so verse 48, if everybody believes him, if we leave him alone, if we don't try to interrupt him, everyone's going to believe him. And if everyone believes him, the Romans are going to take away our place, meaning we're going to lose our power in the leadership and our nation, because Rome's going to see him as a threat, and it's going to destroy our nation. They, as the Sanhedrin, will lose all power and clout if Christ is allowed to go forward, basically. That's the problem here. Now, this is interesting, okay? All of the texts, no matter what language they were written in, use the word topos, the beginning place or the rock, as a specific place, not just a space, but a special space marked off and set apart for a special activity, a dedicated piece of space. The topos is a useful space, just as a kairos is a useful period of time for carrying out some specific task. The concern here is if the Jewish leaders did not rein in Jesus, he might disrupt Roman laws and Roman cultures, and if so, Rome might kick the Jewish leaders out of their roles and appoint new people who can keep the peace. This was a political issue. That's the problem with this. This is what they're talking about here. If we leave him alone, they will believe on him. He will be the foundation, and we will lose our place. we lose all social and political credibility. Verse 49, and one of them, named Caiaphas, being the high priest that same year, said unto them, Ye know nothing at all, nor consider that it is expedient for us that one man should die for the people, and that the whole nation perish not. Now this is the justification, is if Jesus dies, the Jewish nation will not be disrupted by the Romans. They're justifying why we got to get rid of Jesus. And in verse 51, and this spake he not of himself, but being high priest that year, he prophesied that Jesus should die for that nation. And not for that nation only, but that also he should gather together in one the children of God that were scattered abroad. Now, John may have added this rather than Caiaphas saying it. We got to think about this. This is the chief priest, the leader of the Sanhedrin, testifying that Christ is going to die for the people and bring the people together. That doesn't sound like something Caiaphas would want to prophesy of. If Caiaphas said this, he would have had to believe Jesus was the Christ. In light of verse 48, I think they were worried about saving the nation from Rome as the bigger issue. So a lot of scholars look at this and say, this was Caiaphas admitting, hey, if Christ keeps doing what he's doing, he's going to disrupt the whole fabric of our society and Roman society, and it's going to go bad for us. He must die to save our community, basically. More of a political thing than a spiritual thing. So verse 53, then from that day forth they took counsel together for to put him to death. So they didn't believe in the miracle of raising Lazarus. They knew Jesus had done many miracles, and they could not explain it, but rather than use the opportunity to believe in Jesus, they held their own beliefs and rejected Jesus. So instead of going, oh my gosh, maybe this is the Messiah, maybe we should follow him, they went, nope, we lose our power if he succeeds, therefore he must die. That's what their thought is. They're not willing to change their mind to follow God. Verse 54, Jesus therefore walked no more openly among the Jews, but went thence unto a country near to the wilderness, into a city called Ephraim. There continued with his disciples. So again, this is just the anger and resentment against Jesus has just been ratcheted up again against him. Now they're serious. We've got to kill Jesus. We got to get serious about this. Verse 55, and the Jews' Passover was nigh at hand, and many went out of the country up to Jerusalem before the Passover to purify themselves. This is the third Passover that they've mentioned. So we're coming to the 3 years, the end of Christ's ministry. Then sought they for Jesus, and spake among themselves as they stood in the temple, what think ye, that he will not come to the feast? They're hoping he comes to Passover because they want to use this opportunity to capture him. They know if he's a good Jew, he will be here on Passover and we can take him. Verse 57, now both the chief priests and the Pharisees had given a commandment that if any man knew where he were, he should show it, that they might take him. They're looking to take Christ during this Passover time. They're going to use it as an opportunity to capture him. The plans are in motion for the final days, final stages of Christ's life. We're going to see that in these next few chapters, so we'll see you over there.